Welcome back, friends, to another episode of LynchPaints. Now, listen up, all you greenhorns. We're going to be painting the baddest mamma jamma to ever grace the UNSC. We're, of course, talking about the legendary Sergeant A.Johnson. Now, before we dive in, I want to say a massive thank you to Kraken Studios and the legendary creator, Captain Hards, for sponsoring this video and making it possible. So, there will be links to the Etsy shop for Kraken Studios and to Captain Hart's Patreon down in the description below. Do check them out, as they have created some amazing Halo miniatures. Some of the best I've seen out there, really. So, before we dive in, let's grab our 2 sticks and a rock. Make sure you share that rock, and let's get started. But before we dive in, we're going to need a selection of paints, and these are all the ones I've used in this video today, alongside which we're going to need a quite a big basing size brush, a medium detail brush, and of course our teeny tiny brush for all of those teeny tiny places. So of course we're going to start out with a black acrylic primer, and we have the legend himself in front of us. So we're going to start out after the base colour is dried. We're going to do a little bit of pre-shading. So I've got this really nice fluffy brush, and I'm going to start out just by using a little bit of grey. So I've got this nice storm vermin fur. I'm going to wipe the majority off our brush, and then we're just going to test it on the back of your thumb, and then we're just going to go over just the top of the armour. You can do this with either a rattle can, or you can use it with an airbrush, but I thought I'd just try a different method and just use a nice dry brush. So we're just going to pick out the areas where the light source is going to be sort of hitting the model. So it'll be like on this knee, this top side of the forearm, obviously his shoulders. We're going to angle the light as if it's kind of heading in this sort of direction. So you're going to be sort of hitting the chest as well, and that sort of thing. Once we've done that, we're then going to use a tiny bit, and I really mean a teeny tiny bit of white. So I've got this white scar, and I'm going to do the same thing, and then just dry brush just a little bit. You don't have to rinse your brush out and do it again. For one thing, it's going to take ages for your dry brush to dry fully, but also it means that it's kind of mixed in a little bit with the grey from before, so it's not going to be a pure white, it's going to be a very, very light grey. I'm just going to use this as a bit of a highlighting method, or like a pre-highlighting method as well. So once you're happy with the pre-shading, we're going to move on to the next stage. So we've got some black, some Abalone black, and some Lauren Forest, which is a nice sort of military sort of khaki green colour. I'm going to mix the two together as a bit of a 50-50 mix, just using a medium-sized brush. Just make sure that your brush is just a little bit wet as well, and this is going to help with the flow and sort of applying the paint onto the model. We're going to go over all of the armor panels on Mr. Johnson. I'm going to start out fairly dark-ish, and then we're going to build our colours up so they are lighter and lighter. And don't forget to do the under armor as well. Had a little look on some reference pictures, and there's a few that have got him in a sort of desert tan with the Under Armour, with the what is it called? Combat greaves? I don't know what it's called. Fatigues, that was it. There's combat fatigues. But the majority, especially like from the game, it's in this sort of Lauren Forest sort of military green shade. So it is entirely up to you what shade, whether you go for tan or this kind of military green that you use for the combat fatigues underneath, but I'm just going to go with the green. So, once that layer is dry, we're then going to add in more and more of our Lothran green, just a little bit at a time, just to build our colours up. Keeping our paints nice and thin down with some water. And we're going to concentrate on the armour panels. We're going to leave the combat fatigues in this really dark green, as we'll go back over it with a fine detail brush and do some camo little kind of swirls over the top. And then that way that's going to build the colours up really nicely. So at this point we're using pure Lothran blue, and this stuff is absolutely ideal for this kind of olive style UNSC army colour for the armour panels. And as we're building our layers up, getting lighter and lighter, we're going to work in smaller and smaller areas, and this way it helps to create a really nice blended look, especially when you're thinning your paints down with a tiny bit of water. That just helps with the flow. It also means that it thins the paint out just a little bit, so when it dries it blends in a lot more smoothly than if you weren't to thin your paints. So at this stage I'm going to swap over to a really fine detail brush, and we're going to pick out the straps for the armour panels. I'm just using pure Lothran blue, sorry, Lauren Forest. We're just going to pick them out. And then what we'll do afterwards, using the same brush, is that we're then going to start to highlight the armour panels. I'm going to mix in a little bit of this Screaming Skull, so this nice kind of cream colour, because I think that that would go really nicely with the green. It will help to create this nice warmth to the armour, rather than just using white. So it's going to mix in just a little bit of this, just to make it a little bit lighter, because of course we can always add a little bit more of the Screaming Skull to make our colours lighter, but if we go in and it's too bright, then it's a little bit harder to work back down again. So I think that's quite a nice mixture there. But have a little play around with your mixtures, and make sure you keep your paints nice and thin as we go through painting this model, because if you do any mistakes it's much easier to clean up. After the highlighting is complete, we're going to go back over to the compact fatigues. While we have our teeny tiny brush, we're just going to go back into using pure Lothran blue, and we're just going to pick some areas and just sort of really loosely make a few little squiggles, some lines. You can have a little look at some images as well online, just for reference. But also, while I had this Lothran green and Lauren green, Lauren Forest, god darn it, this one, while I had this paint, I then went back over his cap just to give that a nice little highlight as well, and we're just going to just make just a few little squiggles here and there. Doesn't have to be neat, just has to look like it's a camouflage. So have a little fun with it, and then once we've done sort of one layer with this sort of colour, we'll then go over with using a little bit of Screaming Skull into the mixture as well, just to create some lighter squiggles, and we'll go on to the next stage. So I kind of figured that mixing in the Screaming Skull is going to make the fatigues look a little bit too similar like the armour. So I figured we're going to darken it down. I'm going to just have a little play around with and use some of this Cantor blue just to darken our green down. And then I'm just going to thin it down with a little bit of water. You could use black, which is totally fine, but I'm just going to just experiment with using a little bit of blue just to add a bit of a cooler sort of shade into it. And if it doesn't look great, then we can always just use something else. But just I thought to try and use something a different colour so it's more distinguishable from the actual armour itself. It's not... I mean, what do you think? I don't think it's... with the blue, it's that great. So, we're going to do it. We're just going to use Abaddon Black. Just using a tiny bit of it. Make it nice and dark. And I'm going to use that instead. So that's the armour pretty much done. And yeah, I'm glad that I went for the black rather than the blue, but you never know, these things, they might end up looking really, really nice, but it just, for this instance, it didn't quite work out. So we're now going to go over all of the leatherwork and also his face. So I've got some of this Abaddon Black and some of this lovely Mournfang Brown as well. So I'm going to mix the two together so it's a bit of a 50-50 ratio. And then we're just going to kind of glide over the tops here. So it's almost treating it like a heavy dry brush. Just leaving the recesses nice and dark with the pouches. It's got a couple on its chest as well. Let's make sure I do that belt buckle. But we'll come back to that and paint that a nice silver. Do these bits. And then we'll start to do his face. But we'll just put this kind of base colour down first. Now that we've done the first layer, we're then going to use pure Mournfang Brown. And then this is where we're going to start to highlight the pouches. Make them stand out just a little bit more. So it's going to go across the tops. A little bit too much paint on my brush there. It's a little bit kind of down the sides. Don't have to be too neat with this. But just to give the impression that it's been given a nice highlight, will do the job. So I'm going to move on to his skin, and I've got some of this Gene Stealer purple. So I'm going to mix it in with the darker mixture that we made before, with the Abaddon Black and Mournfang Brown. Just going to add in just a little bit more. So adding in the purple will make the skin look a lot more skin-like. Just trying to think. I believe he's got bare hands as well, so we're going to give the hands as well a nice little base coat as well. And just adding in the purple will help to differentiate the colours that you use for the skin and to the colours that you used on the belt pouches and also the chest pouches as well. Chest rigs, I believe that they're called. So you want a nice, real nice thin brush with a nice fine tip. I'm just going to pick out the raised areas on the face as best we can. It's got lovely detail on this model, really, really lovely. And just keep your paints nice and thin down with water. Just going to kind of pick out like the cheekbones and then the jawline. And then just kind of marry it up near the ear and then go around the back of the neck as well. Just a little line. There is a little line at the back that's raised for his hair, so that we can just fit in just afterwards just to tidy it up. The same with his mustache as well. Do his nose just under the eye as well. The eyes are teeny tiny, but they are there, so do not forget them. So with the skin, we'll you can go back over it just a couple of times just with this first mixture, just to really embed the colour in. And then what we'll do to lighten it up is that we'll mix in a little bit of the Screaming Skull, just a tiny amount at a time, and probably a little bit more of the purple as well, just to help, just to give it that skin coloration. Okay, so my highlight's a little bit too bright, so it's going to darken it down a little bit. So grabbing a little bit of black, a little bit of the purple as well. Mix it into our previous mix, just to darken it down, and then we're going to start just to blend back in. Just around the cheeks. The chin highlight's fine, and so is the nose. I just want to just darken it back down just a little bit, just so it's not too bright. Then we're going to very carefully do his lovely, iconic moustache. I know it's probably hard to try and see exactly what I'm doing here, because it is a very, very small model. But if you're following along and you have this model with you, and then it should just make sense. I'm just going to use this black just to fill out where the eyes are. Just maximise the contrast, and then we're going to go back over and put a tiny little white dot in the middle of the eyes. I don't know how well you can fill focus. So with a teeny tiny brush, I was just about able to pop the little kind of white dots in for his eyes. So we're going to move on to the assault rifle now that we have done the face. And I've mixed up with Abaddon Black. I've popped in a little bit of the Storm Vermin fur, and we're just going to just go over the main body. Cool. And then we're going to just mix in some of the Storm Vermin fur, and we're just going to use it just to highlight. And then one of the last steps, we've got this Iron Warriors Silver, and we're just going to use this just to go over the top of the assault rifle. And also we're just going to, while I'm here as well, just going to pick out his belt as well. You could paint it gold if you wanted to, or you could just have it as silver. It's entirely up to you, but you're Sergeant Johnson at the end of the day. And then finally, using this Rune Fang steel, which is a nice light, almost just a chainmail silver. I'm just going to use this just very carefully, just to highlight where we've gone over with the Iron Warrior Silver. So this is how I went about painting the legendary Sergeant A.Johnson for the UNSC in the Halo franchise. It's been a real pleasure to paint. Sergeant Johnson does also come in two other model forms, one where he has the assault rifle raised up, posed on the tactical rock, and the other where he is carrying a shotgun. Didn't quite have time to paint those, but I will be painting those separately, and they'll be images and some videos over at my Instagram page at LynchPaints. Want to check me out over there with the progress on the other two. And this video was possible thanks to the great Kraken Studios and Captain Hart. I just want to say a massive thank you to them for sponsoring this video as well. And if you like the model that you see before you, then there'll be links to their Etsy page and also the Patreon as well, where you can go and support them. If you go over to the Etsy page, and if you tell them that LynchPaints sent you, then you will receive a discount on your order. They do free shipping to within the UK. Outside the UK, unfortunately, for my overseas friends, there will be a charge on that, but it just depends on where you are based in the world that you want these amazing miniatures sent to you. They have a wide variety of Halo miniatures on there. There's loads of Covenant, including like Jackals, there's Elites, there's Brutes. With the UNSC, of course, you have the legendary Sergeant Johnson. You've got Marines, there's Spartans, there's vehicles on there as well, and their range is ever growing by the week. So keep an eye out on their page, and again, tell them LynchPaints sent you and you'll receive a discount on your order. So massive thank you to them, and a huge thank you to you as well, everyone that has joined along and has watched my content and enjoys the video. So don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button down below. It's free, it only takes a few seconds to do so. And if you want to support me a little bit further, then I do have a super thanks button down below. You can click and you can send me however much you like. Coffee, or maybe some new paints, or to be honest, I will be getting some new brushes at some point. These synthetic brushes, they're not too great, so I'm going to try and get some non-synthetic ones just to provide some better quality painting for everyone at home. So thank you ever so much for watching. As always, stay safe, stay beautiful, and we'll see you all next time, Marines.